For the low price of $24.99, a G5 like this could have been yours in 2004. And also if you actually had that much money just sitting around and you wanted to get a new Mac. The display though was not included. That's an extra $12.99. The G5 itself has easily become one of my favorite retro Macs, but that's mainly just because I actually have this here and I have it connected up to this awesome setup. When it comes to the cosmetics of the setup, the keyboard and the mouse have some standard wear and tear, but I'm really fortunate to have this cinema display where it's pretty much brand new. I mean, this is as close as it can be, apart from it being new old stock. The G5 tower is almost the same, except when you actually look at the bottom here. So we're going to be fixing it the way Apple intended. So let's get the G5 out from under the desk and fix it with the official Apple repair tool. So apparently all you have to do is take the tool here and tap it on the damaged areas. Wow, this is actually insane. I can't believe how well this worked. Power is connected to the Mac. I just want to make sure it still works. Uh-oh. Where did this tape come from? Why is the Mac filthy? What did this even do? Oh, come on, man. What is this? What is this? This is terrible. It was supposed to fix it, not do whatever this is. What about the inside? Hopefully that's still the same. Where's my G5? Where is my G5? This is not the same machine. Where is it? Where did my G5 go? Right here. Of course there isn't a repair tool that could instantly fix the aluminum, but I just wanted to have some fun here because we now have 2 Power Macs. Technically, I never lied because the official Apple repair is usually to spend more money, and that is exactly what someone did when they bought this brand new. Obviously, this is not going anywhere. This is my first Power Mac. This is the first G5 I've ever used, and honestly, this has just been a rock-solid system. I spent a lot of time cleaning out the entire system, and even though I did not take out the processors or the logic board, everything else was taken out and cleaned as much as possible, and as a result, the system is still dust-free. It looks just as clean as when I reassembled it, and this also came with the acrylic piece, unlike that one. Now, we've talked a lot about this Mac in particular. I've made several videos about it because it's a PowerPC Mac, it's a Power Mac, and honestly, it's just a really cool system to use. But the important difference about this is that this is a June 2004 edition, and this is actually a 2003 variant. First off, can you tell that this hasn't been touched? Even though the metal on this one isn't perfect, it is actually dust-free. And in fact, if I take out the fans here, you can see that this is still shiny and actually clean. Now for comparison, yeah, that's bad. I mean, the fans aren't necessarily terrible, but yeah, I'd rather have a clean set of fans like that. According to the factory specifications, this is a 2.0 gigahertz system with 2 processors. It initially came with 512 megabytes of RAM, but that doesn't look factory to me. And this was actually optioned with the highest capacity drive at the time, a 250 gigabyte hard drive, which is unfortunately missing, but we do actually have the spare set of hard drive screws, so we could reuse those if we want to. And I'm not exactly sure about the state of this drive. It doesn't have the sticker like on this one, so it's possible this may be from an older Mac or something else, but we just need to actually see what the sticker says. And according to the sticker itself, this says that it's a Radeon 9600 Pro, but I guess we'll just have to double check. But considering this card has dual DVI, it's kind of a deal breaker when it comes to this setup because we obviously use ADC around here. And according to Mac Tracker, it says that it has the same amount of VRAM as the GeForce in this system, so it doesn't seem like it's going to be a big upgrade in the first place. And this card itself has been working out just fine. The information sticker down here actually has another sticker for a new Ethernet ID. And the reason as to why is because there's actually another card in this system, an Ethernet card. I know that it's a Netgear and it looks like it's from the same time period as the G5 itself, but it's just something that we'll have to double check alongside the GPU. The card also has a cool looking Netgear logo. It's just cool to see that this actually has something else apart from the GPU, because when I got this system, the only thing inside it was the GPU. That also applies to the RAM. And in this case, it looks like, well, we are pretty much covered for RAM. Here's the optical drive. It does look like a factory component, but it's not original to this G5. There's no bezel and there's no eject button, but the date code says that it's from 2006, and it's a Pioneer drive. So it's obviously 3 years newer than this G5, and it kind of reminds me of the drives inside a Mac Pro, because obviously there's no sticker here. There is no Apple logo, but Pioneer has made Apple drives in the past. We don't have a free CD this time, but we do have a lot of free dust. And no, we don't have an airport card this time. We definitely have to check out that RAM though, and who knows, it could actually be maxed out. Now, I wasn't expecting too much in terms of the capacity here, but we actually have not one, not two, but 4 1GB sticks, and the other 4 are all 512 megabytes each. For comparison, the main G5 has 512 megabytes total. Now, if you're wondering as to why we're not just going to leave the RAM inside this machine, as you saw earlier, the one problem about this G5 is that it doesn't power on. Now, I've done some testing off camera to see if anything could be fixed here. I've swapped out the components of this G5 into this one, and even with different RAM and a different GPU, it still does the same thing. The way it tries to power on and then it just immediately stops looks like a power supply issue to me, and it's pretty much the exact same thing that my iMac G3 does. It just tries to power on and then it just immediately stops. And if you know anything about the G5s, the power supply is all the way down here, and it's not exactly the easiest thing to get to. Now, if I had a replacement power supply, I'm sure I could just swap it in, and this machine probably will work just fine. But considering I don't have that, we're going to be using this one as a parts system to upgrade this one. And yes, it is pretty ironic that the one with cosmetic damage works just fine, but the one that actually looks good on the outside doesn't actually work. We're obviously going to swap the RAM into this machine, but as for the GPU and the network card, we're going to leave that for another time. And whenever we do actually look at those cards, we will also clean up the exterior of the G5 and maybe a bit on the inside. At the very least, I want to make this look nice on the outside, so this can actually, look like a cool G5. And maybe we could integrate it somewhere in the setup just because it looks cool. And it can actually still support weight because, this is not going anywhere. It's a heavy chassis, and we could actually use it as a part of the setup itself. And even though it doesn't power on, we can still use this system as a storage system for G5 components. So we can actually just take the RAM out of the main G5 and put it into this, because obviously we'll now have empty RAM slots. Another thing that happens during testing is that the clip for the GPU, which is at the end here, decided to just snap off. Now, it's not super essential because the card itself stays in just fine, but I didn't get any of the screws here either, so they just kind of stay in place as it is. Even though this happened, I did also get a DVI to VGA adapter, and I also got this gray power cable. Now, even though it's not the official one that a G5 would have initially come with, I think I will clean this up and swap it out to use with the main system here, because they're both gray and they actually go well with one another. I also don't necessarily need a super long cable anymore, considering, well, things have changed. So I think that this will look great with the G5. I've cleaned up the RAM off camera, and as you can see, it's looking fantastic. The contacts are in great shape, and overall it looks like we just bought some brand new RAM to install in the G5. Now, the only thing I really had to fix, or I guess just modify, is that this sticker here fell off of this stick of RAM, so I put a piece of tape on it to put it back on, because obviously we don't want to forget what capacity it has. The matching stick here has the same sticker, so we obviously want to keep them together. But apart from that, everything looks great. The outgoing RAM here has worked really well inside the G5, and this is actually the factory specification in terms of the sticker here. Now it's obviously not the factory RAM, but for only half a gigabyte, the G5 was still pretty capable. Obviously they're different brands, but 256 megabytes each, and I'm sure that, especially with a system like this, more RAM is going to be very noticeable. If we didn't even have that much RAM to begin with, these two sticks alone are already way more capable than the other ones, because obviously 2 gigabytes here compared to half a gigabyte. Now that is awesome. The power cable was surprisingly filthy, but as you can see, it turned out really nicely, and it's pretty much spot on with the color of the plastics inside the G5. So let's go ahead and close up this G5, reassemble this G5. It is back, and it's better than ever. Nice. In about this Mac here, we have 6 gigabytes of RAM. Now that is awesome to see on a G5. But what's the point of having an upgrade like this if we don't even have the benchmarks? Well, don't worry, because they're right here. We've got the usual Geekbench, Xbench, and OpenMark benchmarks here, but I also looked around for some other PowerPC ones, and I've discovered iBench, CocoaBench, and I have 2 different versions of Cinebench here. And before we actually take a look at these, I'll run the exact same benchmarks here and have the results side by side. Alright, so I've done the benchmarks, and well, I've looked at them. They are pretty much identical. There really isn't that much of a difference here. And to be fair, it is only a RAM upgrade. It's not like we're swapping out the processors or anything crazy like that. But here on the left, I have the half a gigabyte benchmarks, and then here we have the 6 gigabyte benchmarks. As you can see, we actually went down by 10, but I think that this is pretty much within the margin of error. And at the same time, there is a possibility where more RAM might actually make the entire system bus slower, but it's a trade-off I'm willing to take, especially in terms of actually being able to use multiple applications without any problems whatsoever. As for the 64-bit benchmark here, they're identical, which is pretty funny to see. Now when it comes to the graphics side of things with OpenMark and the other GPU intensive benchmarks, they are also identical because, again, it's just a RAM upgrade. We haven't swapped out the GPU. Previously we got a score of 2032, and we got the same one after the RAM upgrade. Now, I haven't heard of iBench before actually finding out about it for this test. It's a universal application, so obviously we can use it with Intel, and I don't necessarily know what the baseline is for this, but it gave us a score of 1.65 for 512 megabytes of RAM, and this even generates some images such as this, which is pretty cool, and it does some tests based on how well it can actually process JPEGs, bitmaps, doing Gaussian blurs. But if we open up the other one, we have a score of 1.66. So yeah, such a big improvement here. I'm not really taking all these benchmarks too seriously in terms of performance because, well, if it was a completely different system with a different CPU, different GPU, then I would actually pay more attention to it. I think that CocoaBench itself is more oriented towards raw CPU performance in terms of actual number crunching and stuff like that. But as you'll see here, the score itself is pretty much identical. There's really only a difference here because of margin of error and stuff like that. It averages around 35 or 36. Now for Xbench here, the score actually went down as well from 88 to 84. As you'll see though, the CPU test actually went up from 108 to 117, but the memory test itself also went down from 98 to 96, but that's not a whole indicator of how the system actually performs in this. If you take a look at the specifics here, for the system section especially, the allocate went from 173 to a solid 200. So there are some areas of improvement. Otherwise, you're really not going to see that much of a difference in terms of actual CPU performance or actual GPU performance. And finally, we have the Cinebench score. Now, I wasn't able to get OpenGL to run properly with the newer version here. I don't really know why, but we got the CPU score itself. It went from 0.66 to 0.63. Yeah, really not that much of an impact because, again, this is more of a CPU test. But on the older version here, there is actually a slight increase. Single CPU rendering went from 263 to 292, and multi-core, or I guess multiple CPU in this case, went from 339 to 370. But one thing's for certain, the memory indicator here now is, well, it's empty because we have so much RAM available. That is awesome. 5 gigabytes of free RAM is always nice to have. Now, to be fair, there's still a lot we can upgrade in terms of the G5 itself. The RAM itself isn't even maxed out. Plus, it is so cool to see just another G5 casually sitting there being a G5 because these are awesome systems. Even if it's not fully functional, from the design standpoint alone, it is just so cool to see. Meanwhile, this one can be underneath the desk here, continuing to actually compute on a G5 chip, or in this case, dual CPUs. And I can't wait to see what else we can actually do with macOS. There's still a lot we can do with this tower. Cosmetically, it does look fantastic, and it would be awesome to integrate this into the setup because having dual G5s is double the power PC. The second G5 joins the first one, which is now upgraded, which also means we can try out some other software because of that RAM limitation being gone. And even though the setup is always going to be a work in progress, at least it works.